Everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Women of Community Banking podcast. I've got Sarah with me today. Hi, Sarah. How you doing?
Hello, I'm great. How are you doing?
Friday, 5 p.m. So today has to be very special, and it's one of the very special interviews because of which I am still working till 5 p.m. on Friday. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. The way how I know Sarah was, I think, GAC couple of years back when we met,
Yeah,
and then we just kept in touch here and there. I invited Sarah, and she was kind enough to accept the invitation to be on the podcast. Firstly, thank you for taking your time out to do the podcast with us today. Appreciate it.
absolutely. Happy to.
My pleasure. I don't think, Sarah needs any introduction. She's one of the popular people in credit unions, but still, I'll try to do, half good a job. She is a communications specialist, expert. The synonyms continue for the last 27 years in credit unions, and she's founder of the popular media outlet Credit Union Connection. Guys, if you don't follow it, go to LinkedIn and follow it right away. You get amazing content out of it. I love what she does
Thank
over
you.
there.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I don't know if I did justice to your introduction. Obviously, I have it. 27 years is not easy to encapsulate in 27 seconds. If you want to go and, maybe add something, feel free.
I think you're just trying to emphasize how old I am.
Not
Man.
really.
So yeah, no, the credit union connection kind of spun out of my consulting gig. I've been consulting with credit union business partners on their communications with credit unions and helping them to better market to credit unions for the last almost 9 years now, since I left Credit Union Times, which I really loved my time there. I got to learn so many different things, and I think we'll get into some of this later on. But yeah, I started out as their Washington, D.C. reporter and moved on up and then ended up being their publisher and editor by the time I left. Yeah, so it was a lot. I got to see a lot of different things there. I got introduced to credit unions. A little bit before that, I was at this tiny little newsletter that doesn't exist anymore, but it was like 1999. I was putting up their first website. It was very exciting at the time. Y2K and a new website. So that's how old I am.
That's okay. That doesn't really harm. But the emphasis or the cool thing is that you were still doing newsletter in 1999 when I was what? 5 or 6 years old? You're still doing that, right?
Shush. Shush.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But this is interesting. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, having that vision of a newsletter in 1999, that was really cool and fresh. I mean, that's the reason we respect you, Sarah. In the entire industry, people love you. Let's talk about your journey, Sarah, very quickly. What has been your journey so far?
Um, I after learning about credit unions, I fell into like I think everybody does almost, unless you were born into it. Literally, it's one or the other. And I fell into credit unions, like I said, in '99, and I just really liked. My undergrad was political science with a minor in journalism, and so I really liked writing about the regulations and different things for this regulatory newsletter, and then also being the DC reporter at Credit Union Times. I loved the game of lobbying, like understanding how that worked firsthand rather than in a textbook. Regulations, like credit unions could actually be exciting too. It was like, oh, we're going to go do this big press on the Hill, and how are we going to position ourselves so that, to be persuasive and be the good guys. And so, yeah, that was really fascinating to me. And I think, when I became the editor in chief at Credit Union Times, I was very intrigued by the idea of being able to see everything as one larger piece rather than just my little vertical, being able to see what was going on more in like lending and credit cards and all the different things that were not always Washington. Obviously, those things are always covered by regulation and whatever, but yeah, things that were outside my general purview as a reporter. And as I got into it, I started creating products and stuff with the sales team. And then, which was my first taste of thinking I might want to be on the business side rather than eschewing not liking the business side. So yeah, when our publisher at the time left, I became publisher and editor in chief, which was like really cool. Again, like kind of like the game of lobbying. It's also like, how do you make more money for the company to support what the editorial team wants to do, and at the same time not compromise your editorial integrity. And so creating programs and setting just a culture, I think, that I had there about, we don't cross the line, might tiptoe up to it, but we're not going to ever compromise what we're doing. And we honestly lost money sometimes because of that. And I mean, we as an organization had to be okay with that. And I think pretty much everybody supported me. And then, I was at Korean Times I was the editor and publisher in chief for like 4 years. And I was able to, it was not long after the housing crisis, the corporate credit union crisis, I was able to not only stem the decrease but also actually turn it around to record revenue and record audience and record everything. And I won a couple awards that year. That was a lot of fun. And I decided I wanted to go out on my own because there were things I was still, even though we were able to be innovative, and a lot of times that meant working around things, I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do. And so that's when I started consulting for business partners, helping them to reach credit unions. And fortunately, I already had this huge national platform. And then during COVID, I was having virtual happy hours. I swear I invented them. Ever I did it before it was cool, people. Because it was like the very first month after COVID, everything shut down. I was like, nope, we're gonna get together somehow or another. So yeah, during one of those happy hours, people were talking about what they liked and didn't like in the credit union media, I guess because of my background. And yeah, I took some ideas from them, some of the stuff that I knew I wanted to do if I were gonna get into publishing again. And that's the credit union connection now, which has been a lot of fun to watch be a part of it growing and watching it grow. And really, I have to credit my business partner slash life partner, my husband, John. That's when we really started growing, was when he joined us and I didn't have to keep invoicing or forget invoicing. So that was a big problem. So yeah, that's kind of that's been my journey. And I've really stayed in credit unions because I love how they serve, or instead of the disposable like Kleenex style businesses, and they need to exist. They're trying to build basically the old school 100-year business where you're going to be around for a long while and impact the community in very positive ways. And so marrying doing good with, doing good business is very appealing to me. So that's kind of, I try to do that with my own for-profit business. Because I think it's a good idea to allow something to live on beyond yourself.
That's interesting that your life partner has become your business partner. Hence, you guys are rocking it. Amazing.
Thank you.
That's an interesting thing. Let's talk about why credit unions, right? Obviously, people have done 10 different things, but what actually drew you to credit unions like so early in your career?
Yeah, no, like I said early on, I fell into them. My dad had a credit card at one of the largest ones in the country, and that's all I knew of credit unions. My friend's mom, I remember, even worked at the same credit union back then, but I didn't know what it was. I just knew she had an office and we used to use her copy machines. Sorry, Pentagon. Anyway, so yeah, I think the idea that they're truly trying to make a difference in the world, I think the idea of being not for profit really helps them be able to balance that good business versus or good business and doing good for the community, because they're not chasing that quarterly target. And again, nothing wrong with those companies, but you need both. I think you absolutely need both. And so, yeah, that's why I've stayed in cranes for so long. I have so many stories that I've heard along the way that just reinforce that practically every day.
Interesting. Let's talk about change, right? You've seen what you've seen those years ago versus now. Media, communication, journalism, whatever you call it, has changed. It has changed a lot. Right? So, how did journalism at credit union times change your view of the industry?
Like, you don't necessarily think of financial institutions as being terribly exciting. Like I said, I've found the strategy of lobbying, who you're going to contact, how you're going to put yourselves in front of them and try to get, what you want or try to stop something you don't want. I think that credit unions are fascinating. I think they really do not leverage their cooperative nature nearly enough. I would love to help them do that more. I mean, hell, we started the FAB Karaoke Collab, which is a collaborative of a bunch of smaller business
Interesting.
partners. Yes, a collaboration of a bunch of smaller business partners who wanted to be at GAC, but not, you know, drop a ton of money to be there. So yeah, that's how that got started, and we're really trying. We want everybody to be able to afford to advertise, because that's one of the big threats I think to credit unions is they don't know who's out there because they only know the ones with the largest marketing budgets, and
Yeah,
that nothing wrong with those guys either, but the others deserve a fair shake to get in front, to get their names in front of others as well, that in front of credit union leaders. Yep.
that makes sense. Let me ask you about stories, right? I mean, I consider myself as partially a storyteller, not one of the best ones, but trying to tell one story at a time, like stories of yours, stories of other leaders. I would ask you about maybe one such credit union story that really sticks to you. I mean, I'll give you mine before that.
Mm-hmm.
I was new to the country, typical immigrant, didn't have credit history. One of the larger credit card issuers gave me a credit card with a credit limit of $500. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, are you serious? Now, I could not do much about that, but it was one of the credit unions who came forward
Mm-hmm.
and gave me my first credit card. And essentially, it was one of the CEOs who trusted me. He didn't even know me who I am, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that was a story that I'll maybe pass on to my kids. I don't have kids yet, but when I have kids, I'll pass on to my kids for sure.
I have a
So
grandchild, so yeah, emphasize again how old I am. Go on.
my question is again the same, right? Do you want to talk about one story, Sarah, that really stick to you for credit unions and you felt, no, this is the place I really, really want to be at?
Can I tell two? Three? Oh gosh. Okay, that might be a pressure. No. So my personal story, when my husband and I got married and we were young and dumb.
All of us.
That happens. That happens. Yeah, we got ourselves in a spot of trouble, and our credit union allowed us to get a home equity loan, consolidate the debt, lower payment. I was like, I wouldn't have loaned to us, but they did. They took that chance. So that's my personal story, and I think one of the things that credit unions don't do enough also in communicating their brand is telling those types of stories, because I mean that very likely could have saved our marriage. I mean, it certainly, saved our money, but it's not always about, I mean, yes, it's about money, but it's not always about that. Financial strain causes a lot of other problems for people, mental health, what have you. And so credit unions need to emphasize kind of that part of the business when they're telling their story on the Hill or in the streets of their own town. So that's my personal story. One of my favorite stories that I have heard was a credit union that works with people who are soon to be leaving the penitentiary system. And so they start inside as providing financial education for the last several months of their time there in their area. Transportation's a real problem, so they get them a bus pass, and they work with community partners to find careers, find jobs. And this one particular, they would share with me this one particular gentleman who had been in prison for drugs, I believe it was. And the problem with prison, being released from prison, is recidivism. You go back to that same environment. And his dream, though, was to buy a home for himself and his mother. And so the credit union worked with him. They got him this job. He was working at a t-shirt shop. He ended up managing the t-shirt shop. And then in the end, he was able, through a savings program with the credit union, to have or save enough money to have a down payment for a home for him and his mother and get out of that like neighborhood situation that they were in. So that's how credit unions really change lives. You challenged me to a third one. I'm going to say, so there is a credit union out in the middle of nowhere. It's $40 million credit union. And they've taken on as their mission, South Dakota is very rural. There's not a lot of people, it's not like serving in, you're outside of New York City or in New Jersey, in Hoboken. No, it's not like serving that area. But they've taken on this area of their community that they're serving, and really also within that focusing on a particular Indian tribe, Native American tribe they're trying to serve. And just listening to their story of learning about the culture and how they think of money, and how do you maybe nudge that thinking to be a little more, to help them become more financially stable, is just truly amazing. And this $40 million, these credit unions say, oh, we can't afford it. We can't afford a branch there. We can't afford blah, blah, blah. Well, they're out there doing it. So I think really owning your mission, owning your community, your field of membership, whatever it is that you serve, and digging down deep and really fulfilling that mission on a very, very grassroots level. So that's the kind of stories I.
Interesting. Now, talking about smaller credit unions, I mean, I don't know, it's good or bad. A lot of people are always focused towards larger credit unions, and hence smaller credit unions do not really get the attention that is needed. But we often fail to realize or understand that these guys are the backbone of our economy. The smaller credit unions are the ones who run the economy. That's the smaller ecosystem. So I know there are pressures across smaller credit unions, and it's not easy. Definitely being relevant is one of the most important things, right? And for being relevant today, Sarah, content is king. That's what I realized. I mean, I started doing content like one and a half years back, because that's the reason we are talking on a podcast, right? Content is the key right now. My question is, how can smaller credit unions, stand out with doing good content? I mean, how do you help them, or what should smaller credit unions do?
Yeah, no, I think there is a lot of opportunity for smaller credit unions to have, I mean, they are the ones who see their members a lot of times in these areas where members still come into the branch. Everybody acts like, oh, everybody wants to do it on their phone. No, they don't. And it's not just old people too. There are communities where they intentionally run a credit union out of their home because that is the culture of that community, and it's less intimidating to the people who, I mean, if you think about, you got bad credit, do you want to walk into this blazing building of glass and brick to go tell them, oh, well, I'm going to be late on my car loan this month? It's very intimidating and shaming, honestly, in some ways. So I think being able to capture stories like that is important, first of all. And I think one of the bigger problems that smaller credit unions have, not only obviously they have a resource issue, but also they're doing it every day. They don't see it as special. Really, I've had to talk to people about that. Like, no, this is a big deal. I know you don't think it is, but it's huge. And I think, smaller credit unions not only need to stand out so that they remain relevant and compelling value to their membership, but also there are some of the larger credit unions do really need to throw their support behind the smaller credit unions, because they're right now they're the only ones keeping credit unions from being taxed. And I know they're not the only ones. That's not true. There are larger ones that absolutely still serve their purpose, for sure. But there are some that are truly acting like banks, and that minority will be called out as the rule rather than the exception. So what we're also seeing in credit unions is a bifurcation of the industry. It's just like there's no middle class in America hardly anymore. There's no middle class in credit unions hardly anymore. That is the smallest quadrant, if you will, of credit unions. There's 4,000 under $1 billion in assets. There's some can argue that's maybe too much, and certainly some of them don't deserve saving depending on how they're managed and whatnot. There absolutely needs to be those smaller ones that can, or that are willing to host the credit union in their home, because that's how people feel comfortable doing it. I know my husband and I recently bought a motorhome, and so we've been traveling the country. That's how I got to Money 2020 and ran into you again.
Wow, I know that.
Yeah, because we want to be able to go. I call it the Credit Union Connection party bus, but we we saw a lot that you hear about, but you don't really understand until you see it. Areas where there is no internet connection, areas, I mean, and so yeah, you can't serve everybody on their phone if they don't have internet, or a phone for that matter, possibly. And so I think we can't turn our backs on the people who need credit unions the most. And I truly believe the smaller ones in general are much more equipped to serve those people. So yeah, I think, but using that service as content is and images certainly, even pictures speaks 1,000 words, that's true. I mean, it's a adage because it's true. And nowadays, video, you can get a lot more out of video even. I think the other thing holding them back from maybe doing video is they feel like it has to be all professionally produced and well lit and da da da. Look at us. I'm sitting in my kitchen trying to hide the mess that's behind me. It doesn't have to be like all polished. And I think especially if you're reaching out on social media, which is a great way to reach people, then if to blend in yet stand out from the other financial institutions, you got to be willing to do the things like a true TikTok video, not here are 5 points on blah, blah, blah. No, you need to do the TikTok trend while you're doing that, or something where you can stand out and be memorable in their minds. And I know there are millions of stories out there of credit unions that are memorable, and we need to be sharing them, and just figure out a way to operationalize that on a at least daily basis. Yeah. I went on my soapbox there.
Not really. So what you talked about is really very relevant, right? I mean, being yourself, that's the most important thing. When I came to credit union, even like 2.5 years back, I knew zero. And you know what? I was just being myself, because I cannot change my accent. I cannot change the way how I talk. I am who I am. So let's be the most natural, raw form, and let's be real. So I think that's what people
Yes.
actually can relate to, right? I mean, it's, and I think, I mean, I'm not talking about my example, but credit unions, if smaller credit unions accept that fact and just be themselves, I mean, that's the way how this is meant to be. Great. So, sir, in the interest of time, one last question.
Okay.
Is where you see the credit union mission headed towards?
Where do I see it heading toward, or where would I like to see it heading toward? I think that's an interesting question, because I feel like if credit unions don't maintain that focus on mission, they will no longer exist. There's no point of having a credit union versus bank if you're not really mission driven. And so I think AI in a lot of ways is going to help credit unions maintain their human touch, because it takes care of more of the back office stuff. I think that's really a technology that, and actually I've heard it referred to as underhyped. I do think that is a possibility, that it's being underhyped for how many efficiencies it can create, so that you can refocus your people on truly being face to face with the members and creating that opportunity to fulfill the mission. So that's what I got.
No, I mean, that makes me feel that I'll still have my job for the next 20 years, because that's what I do for a living. I do data analytics and AI
Until you're
for
as
the last
old as
10
me.
years. Sir, again, thank you for taking your time out to catch up with us today and do this. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.